Well, I really love Baptism Sunday. So one of the other things that I didn't really count on is how wet my shoes are right now. So if I'm walking around in a minute and I'm squishing, that was from baptism, I swear. Okay. Anyway, so we're in the middle of a series called Triggered, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I want to give you a sneak peek of what my next series is. Starting June 1st, I'm going to start a new series called Heaven, Hell, and Everything in Between. And now I know when you hear a title like this and it's at church, you might start getting like your dander up, or what is this all about? And is it going to feel like a Left Behind episode? What we're really talking about is forever, right? And what does forever actually mean? What does it mean to live like you know what forever is? And what does it mean to live in the way that you know what forever looks like? And I'm going to argue over the month of June that forever is a way more personal thing than we ever make it out to be. And Jesus has a lot to say about this. So heaven, hell, and everything in between is going to start June 1st. And I'd love for you to invite somebody and be a part of that. It's going to be a really great discussion. We're going to have a whole lot of fun. Tied to that, we're going to do a couple of extra Bible studies. We're trekking through the New Testament together, and we're going to hit right in the book of Revelation about the time this starts. So I'm going to film some stuff. We're going to have some sidebars, YouTube things. Don't miss any of that. The month of June is going to be awesome. Mark your calendars. But for today, we're in a series called Triggered, Faith for When You're Fired Up. And this series has been so much fun for me personally to pray through and think through and study through. But even more than that, it's been so much fun to hear the conversations that you guys are having. The texts that I get about things that triggered somebody, or the emails that I get to see when they're like, oh my gosh, they had this reaction that just didn't match what should have happened. And I got this email from my boss, and the next thing I knew, I'd typed 3 pages. And so it's been fun. I guess fun's the right word again. I'm not sure. But to hear kind of how you all been wrestling with this stuff. And really, like, we're talking about something where exactly what I said, triggered really just feels like when something happens, and maybe it's, again, you get an email, you get cut off in traffic, somebody says something to you, or a word pops up, or your kids stomp on that last nerve that you didn't even know was the last nerve, but then you find out that it was, and the next thing you know, things are flying out of your mouth that don't make sense, or you've frozen, right, and you kind of like, I don't know, black out, or you just kind of become distant from where you are. You can't say anything, or you're like, I got to get out of here, right? I'm going to run, and I can't stay here anymore. I can't be a part of this. I've got to get out of this environment, to get away from this person. The cycle we've been talking about, triggering is a cycle. Is that what happens is this happens over and over again in our lives, and we never really deal with what caused it. And what we've been trying to do is deal with what causes it. And what's underneath all of that for you, and what does Jesus have to say now? I need to lay some groundwork for those of you that have never been here before. If you've been here through the last couple of messages, these next couple of things are a review. But if not, this is really important. And you can catch all of these on our YouTube channel. If something sticks with you today and you're like, I want to go back and see that, totally cool. Go check out our YouTube channel or our website. All this stuff's on there. But here's what's happening in your body when you're triggered. Because like we said, sometimes we react to something and it's like, wow, the way I reacted did not match the circumstance. There's something else going on there. Well, here's what's happening in your body. Okay, this is just a physical process. This has nothing to do with Jesus for a minute, even though I think he made you. This is just how your body works, okay? When you get triggered by something, that word, that environment, that person, that, the person across from you is chewing gum too loud again and you can't take it anymore, you get cut off in traffic, you get the email from your boss or from somebody who you feel is disrespecting you, whatever those things are that trigger you, when it happens, your brain actually shifts gears and your amygdala begins, okay? So this is an area of your brain that actually bypasses the logical part of your brain. So it shuts down your ability to have rational thought and just fires up all sorts of other really fun and interesting stuff. One of those is which it pumps you full of adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline is that thing that makes you feel amped up and like stronger than you should be, and cortisol is that thing that makes you like hyper-focused and reactionary, right? You're ready to pounce at the moment's notice. And again, all of these things are really great if you're getting chased by a bear. They're really not that great when you're dealing with people, right? And so then what happens is it moves into this fight, flight, or freeze process. And this, you found yourself here before, right? Where somebody says something and all you can think of do is lashing back out, right? And the fists go up and you've dug your fingernails into your palms and you're ready. Or you're like, I got to get out of here right now, and you're looking for the exit. You're looking for the way out. Or you push the unfollow button on somebody. Or you run out of a relationship. Like, right, you get triggered one more time. They bring up commitment. You're scared of that. It makes you nervous, and you just take off running, right? Or you freeze. You completely shut down. They're talking to you. You're not hearing them. They're not hearing. Like, nothing's happening. You're completely shut down. None of those processes are super healthy. But here's the thing. You can't actually control this. Right? And this is what we've been saying from the very beginning. Once this process starts, your body's doing this. You can't stop it. This is the way that you're wired. And again, it's supposed to protect you. But the problem is, especially over the past, we've been talking about this for a while, but at least over the past decade, Some really interesting stuff's been happening culturally where all of us find ourselves emotionally boiling over all the time, right? I mean, it just feels like to me, maybe it's social media, maybe it's like we're more connected to each other, I'm not really sure, but you just look around and it feels like people are just at each other's throats more than they've ever been. And it feels like, our last nerve is a lot closer to the surface than it used to be. And that thing that makes us fly off the handle or say the thing we wish we wouldn't have said or run away from something that's probably really good for us happens more and more and more and more. And I think, maybe I'm just self-justifying my existence here, but I think the reason you guys have really interacted with this series so much is because you know this to be true whether you're a Jesus follower or not. Now, I lay all my bias on the table. I'm a Jesus follower, and I think God has a lot to say to where our emotions should be. And this series is not about becoming an emotionless robot. Hopefully you figured that out by now. This series is really about finding out who's supposed to actually be in control and what can we do about it so we don't have regret. Because, listen, I'm a Jesus follower. I get triggered by things. So I'm going to tell you a story a little bit later in this series of something that happened very recently to me. I mean, we're talking in the last 3 months this happened to me. But always after that, what's the feeling that you get? Especially if you're a Jesus follower? Well, shame. Right? And regret. Gosh, I wish I hadn't said that. Gosh, I wish I hadn't done that. Gosh, I broke some relationships. I burned some bridges. And you didn't mean to. And in fact, if you'd been thinking critically or you had known anything about this process, you probably wouldn't have said or did what you did. But now you have, right? And we're living in a society right now where this is happening all the time. We're one social media post away from flying off the handle. We're one kid in his mom's basement beating us at Fortnite from blowing a gasket, right? We're one email away. We're one person cutting in Austin traffic away. We're one snide comment from our boss away from just... And the reason this is so culturally relevant is because this is kind of an all-skate. Like, we're all there. So what does Jesus have to say about this cultural moment that we're in? And is there a way to backpedal from where we are? Well, I think so. And over the past couple of weeks, we've been laying some groundwork and a process to help you step back from that and maybe make some better decisions even when this stuff here is happening to you that you can't control. Now, here's the reason why. This is the big key of the entire series. When our emotions take control, things get out of control. Now, I didn't say when we have emotions, because you should. Okay, you should have emotions. You're a human being. We all have emotions. But when they drive the bus in our lives, it usually takes the bus someplace we don't want it to go. And you put this together with all of the relationships and the people we have to deal with on a daily basis now, it's really easy to see why we all have a short fuse. Now, where does your short fuse come from? This is a review as well, one more time. Our wiring, which is just us. It's just the environment we grew up in. It's, how our parents raised us. It's how we make decisions. It's just like the default settings. I'm a nerd, so I'm a computer geek, and I think default setting, you come up with whatever word you want, but it's just the things that happen when you're not paying attention. Our wiring plus our wounds, which is all the stuff that's either happened to us or should have happened to us that didn't or did, that caused us pain. All that junk we carry around with us. You put those two things together, and everybody gets a short fuse. And this short fuse may not lead to you exploding. It could lead to you freezing. It could lead to you running away. But for many of us, this short fuse leads to our emotions boiling over in us, and we either get flooded, right? We get flooded emotionally, and we can't process what's happening, or we just explode and say a whole bunch of stuff we regret. And interestingly enough, one of the things we do, because I do this, okay? Later on, we're really tempted to go, well, if they hadn't said that, I wouldn't have acted that way. Or if they hadn't done that, that wouldn't have happened to me, right? I wouldn't have done that. It was their fault. Really, truly, they should have known better, right? They should have known me. They should have understood my wiring. They should have understood my wounds and the trauma that I've been through. And if they hadn't said that or done that, if they hadn't sent that email, then I wouldn't have acted that way. And the hard truth that I left you with last week, that all of us have to accept, even if you're not a Jesus follower, this is reality, okay? This is just how culture works. Your response is your responsibility. Your response is your responsibility with your kids, with your spouse, with your friends, with your boss, with the people that you meet in social media, with the person that you're in traffic with, the people you interact with. Your response to them when they do something, that's your responsibility. Now, maybe they shouldn't have said what they said, or maybe they shouldn't have done what they did, but you're in control, right? You're in charge of your response. Your response is your responsibility. And again, back to this reality, for those of us that are Jesus followers in the room, I believe in my heart that we're supposed to live in a way that God's character is portrayed out of us. Do we get it right all the time? No, but we should be trying. And that means that the behavior, right, that's the antidote to this, that was the last thing we said last week, and I challenge you to spend all week this week thinking about what this looked like, was looking at what those things are that trigger you and pre-deciding what your reaction is going to be. Because then you're not reacting anymore, you're actually responding, right? You're looking at those things. You have to take a good hard look at your heart and a good hard look at the things that either you haven't surrendered to God yet, or the things that you haven't dealt with or haven't had, gone to counseling over, or the wiring in you that's not healthy, whatever that junk is. And you have to pre-decide that when someone steps on that button or crosses that line or says that thing or does that thing, you have already pre-decided what you should do, what your response should be. Because then it's not your emotions that are in control anymore. Something else is driving the bus in a much healthier way. Now, the piece of the puzzle we got to add on to this today, right, to build off of where we've come so far, is that sometimes the reaction isn't about what's happening right now, right? Your reaction isn't always about the present. It's not actually about the thing, right? It wasn't the fact that somebody cut you off in traffic. It wasn't the fact that you got an email, right? Because let's just be honest, I don't know about you, but I get 50 emails a day. Not all 50 emails a day trigger me, but some of them do, right? Why? Well, it's because it's not actually what's happening now. There's actually something underneath of this. And Jesus talked about this. We said this in week 1, right? Jesus said this in Matthew. But, right, the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart. And these are the things that defile them. It's not something that just instantaneously happened. There's something else going on underneath. And the beautiful thing about following Jesus is that he owns this, right? Many of us want to be frightened by this verse. And maybe this feels like a challenge to you. But to me, I find great comfort in this. You want to know why? Because this means that Jesus really understands how I work, and he really understands how you work. And what he says is, the stuff that comes out of your mouth, right, and the actions that you do, that actually started with something much deeper than that. And so for him to turn around and promise life and life to the full, for him to turn around and promise wholeness in the place of brokenness, for him to turn around and promise life that makes sense, this is a holistic approach, is what I'm gathering. It's not just behavior modification anymore. It's not just moral code, right? It's not just putting on the shirt and tie and looking the part. It's not just putting on the Jesus t-shirt and everyone thinking that you are that person now. No, Jesus says, look, this stuff is deeper than this, and I'm not just giving you a club. I'm giving you a transformed life. I find great comfort in that. Now, why do we continue to be triggered? Well, this is the hard part, and only people who love you say hard things, so here we go. It's because many of us have still not dealt with the junk that happened to us in the past. Many of us have still not dealt with the junk that we carry around with us. We've allowed Jesus into some of our lives, right? If you're a Jesus follower, or if you're not a Jesus follower at all, then you've got plenty of things you can lay at his feet if you decide to believe he is who he says he is. But for many of us, especially for Jesus followers, we let Jesus into our families, maybe. We let him into our marriage, possibly, right? We let him into, our kids, especially if your parents like, please be in my kids so that, I can deal with them, right? Or whatever. And so we let him into certain areas of our life, but not the stuff, the unhealed stuff. Because if we have to deal with the unhealed stuff, then we have to admit that there's something broken in us, and it feels really uncomfortable. The stuff that happened to us we don't want to talk about, right? The things that someone did, or worse, that someone didn't do. And that pain and that junk that we carry around, that's what's in our hearts. And Jesus is like, that's the junk that's causing you to act this way. That's the junk that's causing the addiction. That's the junk that's causing the reaction. That's the junk that's causing the bad decisions. It's not something you've just come up with on a whim. It's the brokenness of the world causing you to act in a certain way, right? In other words, let me put this as simply as I possibly can. Unhealed pain often disguises itself as overreaction. Your blow up, right, probably wasn't just because someone got the last bag of popcorn at the movie theater, right? If you love popcorn that much, we can talk. It's my favorite snack too. But that's probably not the real thing, if we're being honest, right? More than likely it's attached to something else. Literally, this just happened to me this week. We were in a meeting with a group of people that I care about deeply, and we were talking about numbers. And I don't really like talking about numbers all that much, but sometimes you just have to. And we were having a conversation about numbers, and it looked like the math that I'd been doing, or the process we've kind of been working towards, was wrong. Like there was some data that kind of came up, and we're like, oh my gosh. And I found myself like immediately just, it wasn't about my math, okay, but like I found myself just flooded, all right? And I felt pushed into a corner, and the next thing I knew, these people that I care about so much, I'm kind of like, well, wait a second, that's not fair. And I like, hold on, don't say that. What are you thinking? That's not how this goes. And I just like, stuff starts flying out of my mouth before I could even really control what it is. So, hey, guess what? This happens to pastors too. And when I processed it, that like immediately when all that adrenaline leaves your body, you kind of get that like really uncomfortable like shiver almost, right? And all that cortisol kind of leaves yourself, and you start processing logically, and you're like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? What is it like? Well, how? Oh my gosh, these are people that I care about. How could I possibly have allowed that to happen? And the longer I thought about it in the afternoon, the more I processed it in the evening, what I realized was it wasn't about the numbers at all. It was about me feeling like I hadn't done the right thing. And furthermore, because this was attached to money, and I grew up in, my mom and dad loved me very much, but there were seasons in time when I was a kid where we didn't have, right? And I remember ketchup spaghetti a lot when I was a kid, and I remember a few times the utilities getting turned off, and it just created this weird fear in me. And one of the things that I've had to deal with throughout the years and throughout my marriage is like, I'm the last person to want to like spend money on stuff. Like I don't want to spend money on stuff, right? The bills got to get paid. This is why this whole save first, like give first, save second, live on the rest thing is so real for me. And it's easy for me because to me, that like I grew up not having enough. And so as I said in this meeting with these people, it wasn't about the math. It wasn't about the Excel spreadsheet. It wasn't even about the vision and the plan of what it was. It was all about my fear and my trauma from being a kid who thought I wasn't going to have enough. And what am I going to do? And now all of this not having enough stuff was flooding my brain all over again. Unhealed pain often disguises itself as overreaction. I got to imagine that the guy sitting around the table with me like, what the heck is going on? And in fact, 30 minutes later, we get a text message that, the math was actually right. It was like, and so then I felt really horrible, right? Unhealed pain often disguises itself as overreaction. You guys have done this before. You've experienced this. Even if you're a Jesus follower, you've experienced this. Now, that's normal, right? This happens. It's not great. You don't really like it. But what that revealed to me is that there's actually some stuff in me that's been there for a long time that I haven't dealt with. And whether you believe in God or not, you know what I'm about to say to be true. This is the reality. What we don't process, we repeat. Well, when we don't process, we repeat. This is why we say those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, right? Those who don't think about what's already happened and their actions and their consequences of those actions are doomed to repeat those things again. What we don't process, we repeat. Because, this is why, and I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing because I've, been there, done that in my past, okay? But this is why when something terrible goes on, you think you have to quit your job. Or you got to move, so, okay, well, they said that thing, they did that thing, it's time to move cities, right? And you've moved 4 or 5 different times because this keeps happening, and here's the scary thing, it's going to happen again, right? What we don't process, we repeat. Now, let me say one more hard thing. This is probably the last hard thing I have to say in this message, and I'm going to get to the truth and the grace of all of this. Denial never healed anything, okay? And so not owning it, right? Not going, okay, this is a reality. When you pretend like everything's fine, it doesn't heal anything. I say this a lot when I do premarital counseling for couples that want me to do their wedding. One of the things I say at the very beginning of the whole process is, look, if you went to the doctor's office with a broken leg and all you did was talk about how your arm hurt, he's never going to check your leg. He or she's never going to check your leg, right? And so if we don't actually deal with what actually is going on, no one's going to get better. And this is absolutely true in all of our hearts. See, I believe, my bias on the table, Jesus has great grace, hope, truth, and mercy for all of us. That Jesus is a better way of life for all of us. And what we do, unfortunately enough, is we treat that grace like a kind of a buffet, where I'll take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but I don't want this one because that's going to touch something I don't want to deal with, right? And so we pick and choose where we allow God to work. And so it feels like it keeps us in control. But all we're really doing is not processing the junk that's going to keep popping up. And if you find this pattern, if you find yourself in a place where you're recycling pain in your life over and over and over and over, and you're sick of it, I have some really good news for you. You don't have to live like that. You don't. You don't have to go from trigger to trigger to trigger, from email to email, from someone cutting you off in traffic. You don't have to keep doing that. God has a better plan and a better way. Now, how do you know you're doing this? Here's a little diagnostic tool. What we repress emotionally, we eventually express relationally. So, if you got somebody who's really close to you in your life and you want to know whether this is a thing for you, ask them. Maybe it's your spouse, your best friend, your roommate in college, your coworker who sits right across from you, the person you went to college with, your kids, whoever you have in your life that's close to you. If you want to know whether this is something you do, ask them. Because the only way for us to get this stuff out is often against the other people that are in our lives. And the people that spend the most time with us will see this junk happen. Now, if you're sitting across from someone, don't elbow them, okay? But if you're sitting across from someone who you know that this is kind of their jam, what is the loving way in which you can have a conversation with them to go, I think this might be something that's happening to you. Not to like point a finger and go, thank God the preacher said it because I didn't want to. No, don't do that. But like intentionally thinking about the way in which you can have a gentle conversation with someone about this junk, okay? Now, can I say something really hard? For me personally, and it may not be your thing, but I want to say something maybe you don't expect a pastor to say. Sometimes the relationship that gets broken and bent the most, especially if you grew up in church like I did, is our relationship with God. And oftentimes we find ourselves in a place where it's not, so many triggers are about the trauma of our past, and sometimes it's something someone did or didn't do, or sometimes it's something that something said, or something that happened to us as a kid or an environment or whatever. But oftentimes we find ourselves in the place where we prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed for something to happen, and then that thing didn't come into fruition. Or like we were so dependent upon God, right? And we're like, God, there's no way the situation's going to resolve itself without you. And you're expectant for him to show up, and then you feel like he didn't, right? And what happens is you find yourself in instead of processing it as, well, I need to think about myself. You go, I don't know that I can trust God anymore, right? And so your trigger isn't about something that happened to you. It's about what God didn't do. It's about what God didn't do. God didn't show up. God didn't answer that prayer. God didn't do that thing. And in fact, I would argue, and I'm not, I don't know you. Some of us have never met, okay? But there's probably at least one person sitting in this room that the reason you're not a Jesus follower today is because God didn't do something you thought he should have done. And you found yourself in a place where you go, I just don't know that I can trust God anymore. I want to offer something to you very comforting. That's not rebellion. That's grief. It's grief masking itself as rebellion. I've been there and done that. And there's so many times, right, as Jesus followers especially, where we find ourselves like, can I really trust God? And we get so close to crossing the line, and then we feel like he didn't answer the prayer that we wanted him to, or he didn't do the thing. And so then we're like, God, if I was in charge, I would do this. This makes perfect sense. I don't understand why you wouldn't do this. And it creates this brokenness in us. That's not rebellion, that's grief. And I have something really comforting to me, I hope this is to you as well, that God understands our broken hearts. And I can prove it to you. There's a character in the Bible named King David, and he shows up throughout the Old Testament in lots of different places, but he actually is an author of part of the Old Testament. He wrote the book of Psalms, and the book of Psalms is actually a collection of songs and poems, and it used to be that the church used those as their worship stuff, and they would read them because they rhymed in a different language. They don't really rhyme in English, okay, but in the original language they were written in, there were many like songs and poems, and they would use them in their worship. But the interesting thing about this is King David doesn't just write, oh, God's so good and he's so awesome and I just love him so much. I mean, he writes a lot of that stuff, but he also writes from a place of realness. Like King David, I don't know if you know this or not, but King David actually experienced rebellion in his own household. Now, if you know anything about his story, just quick fast forward if you didn't grow up in Sunday school, okay, but King David actually had an affair with someone named Bathsheba, and that created this whole downward spiral in his life. He made a bad decision that he should not have made. He did something that was not God's best for him, and it led to this kind of catastrophe. The first thing he did was have that woman's husband murdered on the front lines of war. Bad idea. And then after that, he gets confronted by his best friend, and then that creates this whole rebellion that happens in his own family till eventually his own son leads a mutiny against him. And in the middle of that war that he was leading against his own son, worrying that his own son, which this ended up happening, would actually die on the battlefield, which actually happened, King David, brokenhearted as he was, wrote these words: "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saved those who are crushed in spirit." I find great comfort in that. The God that David felt was closest to him in the moment of just deepest turmoil and trial and strife actually understood his broken heart. Didn't pretend it wasn't broken. Didn't get on him and say, why are you acting this way? Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You should do better, right? Get over yourself. Clean yourself up. Do this thing. Work harder. Take care of yourself. And he said, no. He's close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed. The God who David felt was so close is the same God that in Exodus says that he heard his people's cry. He heard his people's cry. Now you fast forward a little bit, and a guy named the Apostle Paul wrote something very similar, and it's actually a promise. This is actually a promise that was made to each and every one of us. And again, as you think about whether it's God that's the center of your trigger, or whatever piece of your past might be the center of your trigger, whatever it is that you haven't kind of handed over, there's a promise that's been made to you. And I believe this promise to be true. This is what God said. This isn't Drew speaking. This is the Apostle Paul saying what God said, okay? And in the book of Romans, he actually records something. It's one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible, and I have to read it to myself all the time, especially when I find myself dealing with junk that happened to me when I was young, or dealing with me in my past, or maybe it happened an hour ago, but it's something that's in the past and I have to deal with it. These words provide great comfort, and they're a promise to each and every one of us. That's what it says. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Doesn't say everything's good, does it? If you're to follow Jesus, life is perfect. That would be good, right? I might push the button on that, but I think this is better. Because what this does is free us from our circumstances. This frees us from our circumstances. This frees us from junk that's happened to us in spite of us, or decisions that we've made in the past we wish we had not. It frees us from all of that. And it says if you decide to step onto this side of loving God and seeking out his purpose in your life, God works all that junk out for the good of you. He can take all the broken pieces and all the mess and all the junk that you can't possibly figure out how to put back together, and he will put it together for you. He will work it out for your good. And can I just say, okay, I'm 40, not quite lived as long as some of you all, but I've lived a lot longer than some of the rest of you all. I have seen this play out in my life time and time and time and time and time again. Then when I'll come to the place of admitting that there's some junk in me that needs to be handed over, that God, there's some stuff in me that I've allowed to just bubble beneath the surface for a really long time, and I don't want to live like this anymore. God has worked it for my good every single solitary time. The hard truth and the place that I had to come to, the realization that I had to make to be able to let that process work in my life, and it's one that I would hand over to you now, is that healing only begins when you stop pretending and start releasing. It's very simple, okay? This sounds all preachery and flowy and poetic. It's just so simple. When one of those things triggers you, your first reaction is shame and guilt, and I think that's where the enemy wants to keep you, okay? But that's not like that. That's one thing. But if you're a Jesus follower, you have another approach, okay? That can be step one, I suppose, but I think conviction is better. And allowing God to go, I'm not sure that was my best for you. And then paying attention, right? You've pre-decided that there's some stuff in your heart, there's some brokenness in your life that doesn't quite take you where you want to be or what God's best for you might be. And then when this happens to you, you make this decision or you say this thing or you get triggered and you blow up and you have all these regrets. The next thing that needs to be out of your mouth is, God, there's something broken in me. And that's good because you're a God who heals things. And I think that this might be attached to something deeper. Will you show me what it is? Will you show me what it is? So I can give it to you so you can do the same thing that you've promised to do for us time and time again, which is to work it out for my good. God, will you take this thing and work it for my good? Will you take this brokenness and heal me from it and work it for my good? Jesus said something really incredible. And I feel like I teach about this about once a year. So if you've been around me long enough, you've heard me talk about this passage of Scripture. And it sounds kind of odd. Like the culture of it doesn't quite make sense to us today because none of us have oxen. And I'm going to read the word yoke, and you're like, is that part of an egg? What's going on? It's actually really profound, though, when you understand the promise that Jesus made underneath of it. Because here's the thing. Underneath Matthew 11 is this realization that Jesus gets how life works. He gets you. Better than you, okay? He probably gets you better than you because he made you. He was there when you were stitched together. He understands how life works. He lived our lives the way that we do. He was tempted in the same way that we're tempted. He felt pain and anger and anguish and all the other stuff, like the full gambit of emotion, right? And the thing that he came to the conclusion of in the middle of that, like this grand idea, was that God had a better way of life than what we had decided on our own. And so one day, when his disciples were arguing and the Pharisees were at their worst and everything kind of seemed pressuring to where he was, Jesus says these words, "Take my yoke upon you, my way of doing things." Okay, this is what used to attach two oxen together, and they would pull a plow with it, and you'd pull the reins, and it would make them go the correct direction. It was just a steering wheel, basically. "Take my yoke upon you, my way of doing things upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble." I love this, right? This is not like he's going to come in with some sort of sledgehammer into your life, okay? You've got enough people that want to sledgehammer you, right? And you may even feel sledgehammered when you come in. I really hope not. I don't want to do that. That's not my goal. But maybe church is a trigger for you, and you come in here and you feel like someone's just swinging a hammer at you. Jesus says, "My way is gentle, and I am humble in heart." Because if I want someone doing heart surgery on me, if I want someone transforming me and making me for the better, I don't want someone who's really arrogant about it. I want someone humble in heart. And Jesus says this is him. And you will find, this is so good, you will find rest for your souls. Not, everything's going to be great. You will not find perfection for your souls. You will not find awesomeness for your, no, you will find rest for your souls. "For my yoke is easy," Jesus says. "For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Let me ask you a really hard question, okay? What do you actually want? Which do you want? Because the world is telling you to do one thing with your anxiety and your triggers and all your junk, right? The world is telling you to do more, to work more, to earn more, to medicate it, like all this stuff that the world says, right? This is the stuff that it says for you to do. But then, again, here I am saying Jesus has a different way. What is the yoke of Jesus? Well, this is what he says. Jesus says, "Let me help. Learn from my ways. Rest in my grace." You got nothing to prove. You got nothing to prove. Walk with me. See, this is the options that are before each and every one of us. And I can't make this choice for you, okay? I can't. But I can tell you personally, in my own life, I did this. It didn't lead me anywhere I wanted to go, except exhausted and burnt out and done with life and people and everything else. But this way of doing things changed my heart. And it continues to change my heart. The further I decide to surrender, the further I decide to turn in a new direction, the more of me I decide to give over and surrender and release to God, the more he works for my good. And I'm a living, breathing example of someone who shouldn't have the life that I have today, except that God moved. Now look, your past might explain your reactions, but it doesn't have to define you, okay? Your past may explain everything. If I heard your story and I heard what you'd been through and you told me your story and your trauma and your junk, I would probably react the same way that you do. I would get it. I would understand it. I promise. And that may completely define the way you react. But that junk doesn't have to define you, right? I mean, this doesn't have to be what makes you you. This can be a thing that happened to you, but it doesn't have to drive the bus. And Jesus can redeem what you're ready to release. Jesus can redeem and fix and heal all the stuff if you're willing to admit that it's there. It's very simple. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask God what is unresolved in you this week, okay? This is your prayer. I want you just for 7 days. What is unresolved in me, God? It doesn't have to be like right after you get triggered. You could start right now. God, what is unresolved in me? What is still broken in me? And then say, God, will you fix it? God, what is broken in me, and will you fix it? And I want to see what happens with 7 days of praying this prayer. I want to see how your heart changes. And I would challenge you to pay attention to that. Because I believe in my heart that God is who he says he is. I believe in my heart that the Holy Spirit does want to work in your life just like he wants to work in my life. And I believe that if you will pray this way for 7 days, something will change in you for the better. And there's 3 questions to help you make that happen. Number 1, have you ever caught yourself reacting to something today because of some pain from your past? What did that look like? Number 2, what are some warning signs that past wounds are shaping your present responses? And number 3, how does Jesus invite you to experience rest and healing from emotional baggage? I would love to pray for you as you think about these things. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the way in which you work in our lives and the healing you want to give us, God. As we think about inviting you into deeper places in us than we're willing to admit, maybe even be there, God, would you just gently and humbly, as we know that you do, whisper into our hearts what wholeness could be like. Show us a picture of what healing could be and make us seek that out with all that we are this week, because I think you have good things for us. God, bless us this week as we go back out into the world and live and seek not to be triggered as often as we were before. God, heal all that junk because we know you can. We love you. We trust you. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all so much for coming to TCAT today. God bless you. We'll go back for part 4 next week, okay? Don't miss it.